Okay, before we finish this session today, we just want to have a look at one more wrong definition of evangelism that's got into the church. So let's look at this together. There's our mind map of where we're going. We've got the truth. Evangelism is the proclamation of the gospel, an event. The first wrong definition, like our fake $10 note, was that evangelism equals the winning of souls. We know that's an error to think like that. And the second wrong definition, any Christian activity which draws a non-Christian closer to Christ is evangelism. We know that's a fake $10 note. Now let's have a look at our third one in the rest of this session. Believe it or not, there's a third definition of evangelism which the devil has sown into the church to stop us proclaiming the gospel. The devil has very subtly fed into the church a third wrong definition. He has sold us the lie that evangelism is a process. Now, this might sound pretty shocking, because I'd always believed in my Christian walk that evangelism was a process. But then as I began to investigate this subject, study it, and I found out that somehow, at some point, the railway lines had been switched, and we now were thinking that evangelism was a process when it was always understood historically to be an event. And somehow the change has been made. I don't know when it happened, but it's happened. Instead of drawing a non-Christian to Christ as a process, a small change is made. We hardly notice the change. It's done with sleight of hand. Very subtle. These devices of the devil are so subtle that you've got to think about them. But that's how he works. He's an angel of light. They sound right, but they're wrong. Drawing a non-Christian to Christ is a process. Evangelism is a process. Now spot the difference, you see. The 1 degree off the truth principle again. See how he works? This is how the angel of light works. He does not want us to notice the small change. The diagram below appeared in a Christian publication. Okay, so this diagram I found in a Christian publication, doesn't matter what it was, but that's what appeared as illustrating, a diagram illustrating evangelism as a process. In fact, that was what it was called. It was entitled Evangelism is a Process. This pyramid has 5 tiers. With evangelism as a process, everyone who is involved in any tier of this pyramid is doing evangelism. Establishing relationships, exposing needs, development, answering questions, decision are all vital aspects of the process of drawing a non-Christian to Christ. We would always say that. Establishing relationships with non-Christians is vital. We want to keep that going. Exposing their needs, vital again. We need to expose their needs, meet their needs. That's what a loving Christian would do. And then we develop the relationship, and then they ask questions, we answer their questions, and eventually they make a decision. Well, that's how, those things are all vital. But none of these activities are evangelism, you see. You've got to hold on to evangelism as the proclamation or the spread of the gospel, otherwise it can all go wrong. We've already discovered from previous teaching in this series that evangelism is an event within a process. Evangelism itself is not a process. For evangelism to have taken place in the process of drawing someone to Christ, the gospel must have been proclaimed at some point prior to the decision. That's what makes it evangelistic. How does viewing evangelism as a process stop Christians from proclaiming the gospel? How does it do this? Just a little change like this, how does it actually stop people giving the gospel? Stop Christians? Well, let's watch this together. Anyone who is involved in any part of the process of drawing someone to Christ will think that they are already doing evangelism. That's the issue. They will reason, I'm already doing evangelism. Why the need to proclaim the gospel? As such, it is highly unlikely that they will go on to proclaim the gospel, you see. And don't you love the Simpsons? The following appeared in a publication advertising an evangelism event, because now what I'm doing is I'm reading bulletins and so on and thinking, oh man, how widespread are these devices in the Christian world? And they're everywhere. Evangelism is not an event, it's a process. Now let's just work through this together. A life commitment, said this advertisement. We need to understand the importance of process. God works by drawing each individual person in many different ways, allowing them to grasp the reality of His love and the change only He can make. This process involves all of us because we are the tangible tools He uses. Now, this is such an interesting advertisement or bulletin inside an advert on evangelism. In this evangelism conference advertisement, truth and error are mixed together. It's always like this with the devil. He mixes in the truth so we won't detect the error. Well, there's the flesh of the fish and there's the hook again. He makes the advertisement sound so very right, we will not detect the error in it. He dresses up the hook of error with the bait of truth. What is the truth in this advertisement that I've just shown? What is the truth in it? Well, it promotes the truth that God does use many different ways, things, people to draw a non-Christian to Himself. He uses lots of ways. We know that. Secondly, it promotes the truth that God delights to use everyone and anything in that process. God delights to use anything. He can use a flower, a sunset, anything, if He wants to. It promotes the truth that drawing someone to Christ is a process. What is the error in this advertisement? Firstly, it promotes the error that evangelism is not a process, but is a process, but not an event. Secondly, it promotes the error that everything a Christian does which draws a non-Christian closer to Christ is evangelism. And that's a great error. This is a perfect result for the devil. Remember, his goal is to stop Christians proclaiming the gospel and stop non-Christians from hearing it. Those are his two goals. But non-Christians will not hear it if Christians stop proclaiming it, so he targets the Christians. Proof that the devil's devices to redefine evangelism have taken hold is literally in evidence everywhere. Many Christian books, music, sermons, magazines, newspapers, tapes, DVDs, videos, church reports, missionary bulletins, event and conference brochures, well, now they're literally marinating in these devices, if you look for them. It's so sad because it's all done unwittingly. Nobody deliberately wants to promote these devices, but they've got in and somehow they've got under our radar and we haven't detected them. See, he gets inside the camp, works from the inside to bring down the Great Commission. It's called the device of the fifth column. Satan tried to work through Judas to destroy the purposes of God. Now, we know what Judas did. The only way to defeat him was to keep completely in the will of the Father. Now, some of you are saying, well, how do we defeat the devil here? Well, we've got to keep completely in the will of Jesus. Completely. We dare not ignore the lesson from history. We have drifted out of the will of Jesus with respect to the Great Commission. We have succumbed to the devil's fifth column device. I love this graphic. I can't believe they've noticed me. There's a fox in the middle of the hounds. Now you have to look at that. He's pretty well disguised, isn't he? And unfortunately, the devil has been absolutely masterful at disguising these things inside the Christian church. Or what I've been up to with the Great Commission. He doesn't want us to even notice any of this. You know what? I feel like I've been a detective for 15 years tracking down the devil, finding out what he's up to. I was telling somebody the other day, it was like I found, when I first got onto this, it was like I found 30 cents missing in a till. And then I went, where's that 30 cents? Where did that go? And I went a bit deeper and I found $1.30 missing. And then I went a bit deeper and I found $130 missing. And I went a bit deeper and I found $1,300 missing. Then I found $1.3 million missing. And it ended up in a Swiss bank account with $1.3 billion missing. So once I discovered one of the devices, I went, "Whoa, where's this leading?" And it went on and on and on and on. And I found all these strategies, these devices of the devil to bring down the Great Commission. It was amazing. But it's taken 15 years to do this, and tracking him and trying to understand how he's done this and what he's done, how he's been able to do this. How do we know all this is true? How do we know that this is true? Well, let me take you back to the very beginning of this slideshow, the very first lecture that we ever did. How do we know that all these devices are working and have worked? Billy Graham's observations, my own observation of evangelism ministries, the vision God gave me of Niagara Falls, the findings of the Barna Research Institute, the research of Manchester University, Ray Comfort's research, Christianity Today magazine, Greg Laurie's observations, Jim Cybala's research, the voice of our own conscience. We know that maybe we are one of the ones who just doesn't go into the world and preach the gospel like Jesus commanded us. These are 10 evidences. It seems that the devil does not restrict his devices of blinding and deceiving to non-Christians. Remember how Corinthians says he blinds the minds of unbelievers so they cannot come to a knowledge of the gospel? Maybe he actually blinds some of us to these devices. He doesn't want you to believe these. He doesn't want you even know that. He doesn't want you to know what this is all about. He wants to keep them covered up. The Apostle Paul and Jesus experienced the devil's hindering influence. One goal of this teaching series on evangelism is to remind us that we too are not immune to his influence. The devil is not just a metaphor for evil. He's not some figment of the imagination stuck in the Bible to make it interesting. He's a real being. He's our enemy. Now, I don't want to let this continue, and I want you to be part of the solution with me. I look forward to seeing you next week. God bless you. Have a fantastic week, you guys. See you.